Illinois State Police have released the officer dash cam footage from the fatal shooting of an armed man on I-55 in McLean County last month. The video shows officers shot and killed the man after he pointed a gun directly at one of the officers. Bill Lally is a police department veteran of over 20 years and teaches criminal justice at Illinois State University. Lally reviewed the video for WGLT. He tells Eric Stock how he feels responding officers handled the chaotic scene.
I think probably one of the most scary calls that any officer can go to is one in which shots have been fired, because you never know what you're going to get into when you arrive on scene. Many times the information is very sparse, and so you're trying to anticipate all sorts of scenarios before you get there in the hopes that you'll be prepared for it. But quite honestly, nobody can ever be fully prepared for what's going to happen, because you just simply cannot anticipate all the moving factors involved in a shooting.
And in this case, officers did not have a lot of information. The call was similar in nature to what you had described. They were responding to a call of a man with a gun and shots fired. There were two vehicles that were stopped on the shoulder of the interstate. When the officers arrived, a man in one of the vehicles, later identified as Trayvon Little, had pointed a firearm toward officers. Then, as police described it, there was an exchange of gunfire with this individual, though it was not clear where Little was directing his shots toward, and he was later struck and killed by police. How do you perceive how police had handled that?
You can see from the video that the initial officer arriving on scene views a number of people standing behind a vehicle. At that point in time, that officer has no idea if these individuals are the victims, are they bystanders, who are they? So, given the fact that as he's arriving, he positioned his squad initially relatively close to that scene, gives the indication that he was going to move forward as far as investigating what's going on here, because again, he did not have a lot of information. However, as soon as he arrived on scene, it became very apparent that one of the males had a firearm, because he actually raised it and pointed it directly at the trooper.
So it's more or less getting confirmation of what they believed initially.
Absolutely. And again, this is an example of how this scene rapidly unfolds. The trooper decided that he was not in a good position, or the officer decided that they were not in a good position when they initially arrived, so he moved the squad car back to a position that he felt gave him enough safe distance to be able to decide what he needs to do next.
What happens after that is they're calling on this individual to get on the ground, and they are still moving around quite a bit. And eventually there were shots fired by the individual, but again, not clear on who he was directing it at, before another officer comes on. Not clear who actually made the shot that hit Little and brought him to the ground. So how do you feel they had handled that following, once they've established the scene?
If you notice from the video that even though the officers were justified in once the suspect raised the pistol and pointed it at the officers to fire at that individual after they had given him clear direction to drop the firearm and he refused, they still held off until he separated himself from that other group of people. And that's just a wise decision. Obviously, you do not want to have the responsibility of accidentally striking a bystander, an innocent bystander. So they made sure that before they started to engage with this individual, that at least he was separated from the other people. And again, it is unclear from the video who fired first, but the fact of the matter is that the first shots that were fired were when the suspect had walked away from that other group of people and the officers felt that the distance between the suspect and that other group of people was large enough that they could engage the suspect in returning fire.
That was their moment to do it.
Right.
As we continue on Sound Ideas with Bill Lally, professor of criminal justice at Illinois State University, is there anything you think they could have done differently or should have done differently?
I don't think so. It would be very easy for me to sit here in the safety of this studio and make judgment on that. But I can tell you that it did appear that the officers were able to maintain some sense of calmness and were not allowing that adrenaline that was pumping through their system to override their training. And this is something we talk about all the time, which is you want to train until these things become almost muscle memory, and that you're going to go through these steps regardless of what else is going on to make sure that innocent bystanders are not in the way. People who are driving by was an issue too. The interstate still had traffic, as you could see, traveling on the interstate, and you had officers engaging across the roadway with this individual.
WGLT had filed a Freedom of Information request shortly after this incident to obtain a copy of the dash cam video, and it came out just this week. What do you make of state police releasing the video?
Illinois State Police have been on a clear mission for some time to be as transparent as possible with all incidents involving deaths involving their troopers. And so I think that this is just another indication that they are attempting to be transparent.
Is it also an indication that they feel the video would vindicate the officers of any public concerns? And if the officers' conduct was questionable, would they have made the video public?
You know, I think, quite honestly, under the Freedom of Information Act, they really wouldn't have had a choice. So I think knowing that, I think it was prudent of them to offer that up first instead of waiting for all those Freedom of Information Act requests to pile up and then having to go through the Attorney General's office and all of that.
That was Illinois State University criminal justice professor Bill Lally speaking with WGLT's Eric Stock. State police say the shooting remains under investigation.